Doctors of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing patients lie about? Story 1. Do you smoke cigarettes? No, I quit. When did you quit? This morning. I smoked for 25 years and quit 11 years ago. It was hard for the first year or so, but now the smell of them makes me gag and I can't believe I ever smoked them. All of that being said, quitting sugar is way harder than quitting smoking ever was. I've done it 1,000 times. I quit several times. I think 5 in total, maybe 8 including weed, which is easy. It's the staying clean part that's hard. Thankfully, I haven't touched a cigarette in like 3 years, I think. I still crave them though. I smell a cigarette and I want one, but I don't ever want the misery that comes with that addiction. Besides, I save hundreds a month without smoking. After I quit smoking every day, I only smoked when I drank for a long time. Then it was only smoking when I drank sometimes. Then it was neither. My body and bank account thank me. Story 2. Part of my job is dealing with medical records. My favorite part is when you are reading the doctor's notes and you can tell they are fed up with the patient's bull from their tone. Patient in for routine colonoscopy. Asked if solids consumed in 24 hours prior. Patient confirms no. In the process of procedure, several dozen kernels of corn are discovered in the colon and cannot continue. Patient specifically instructed not to consume corn beforehand, as this has happened prior to visit. I also enjoyed reading medical records in which some info was almost certainly only included because it was amusing. For example, some psych patients were very creative and descriptive when insulting the medical staff. One intake evaluation included a line saying something like, "Patient stated that Dr. XXX looks like a gothic scoundrel." Another was simply like, "Patient claims to have had made love to Dr. XXX's wife." My friend is a pediatrician. For her, the problem is not the patients, but the parents. They had a sticker on the chart system of warning the staff about problematic parents. Everyone got a sticker, but some had meaning. A lamb meant that the parent was not too bright, and a donkey was a warning. You can guess what it referred to. When I am king, those stickers will be mandatory for everybody. Story 3. Honestly, the dumbest lies are the ones from people who lie about how much alcohol or drugs they use. Alcohol and benzodiazepine withdrawal can kill you, and if you use opioids from the street, then you likely have a higher tolerance and may need more medications in the hospital, so be honest. I truly don't care how much you drink or use, I just don't want you to get worse for something we can plan for and prevent. Had a patient tell me they don't drink because they were a recovering alcoholic. A little further prodding and it turns out the patient eats bowls of rum-soaked raisins because it's eating and not drinking, so it doesn't count. Would literally empty a bottle of rum into a bowl full of raisins, let it soak for a bit, and snack on those throughout the day. All day, every day. I never understood why anyone would ever lie to their doctor. It's super dangerous. Until I became a heroin addict. The absolute contempt and cruelty I was shown anytime I sought medical help is something I'll never forget. Been clean for a couple of years now, and I'll never be honest with a doctor about my past, because I know how quickly the standard of care changes. Medical school can teach you how to heal the sick, but it can't teach empathy or humanity. I'm a family medicine resident with a patient panel that is about 60 to 70% people with current or past addiction issues, and a large portion of my patients are on Suboxone or Methadone. And I get where you're coming from. I had a woman tell me how she went to the ER sobbing in pain because she had a kidney stone and got written off as drug seeking until she told the ER doctor if I wanted drugs I would be buying them on the street, and that's when they did the imaging. I've had nurses refuse to give my patients a drug I ordered because they're addicts. I just want you to know that not everyone feels that way, and I hope you find a compassionate, understanding physician. It is truly amazing and sad how addiction can twist the mind. Rum-soaked raisins are totally disgusting. Story 4. Guy came in for a wound on his lower leg that he said came from a biking accident. X-ray revealed a bullet inside his ankle joint. The wound was from shooting himself by accident while holding a gun. Still don't know how he didn't fracture anything. Reminds me of an older Englishman I met at a bar in Thailand. He had an exterior rod with pins sticking out of his leg and was on crutches. We start talking and I asked him about how he did it. He said the short answer was that he wrecked his motorcycle. I asked what the long story was. He said, "I came home and my girlfriend accused me of cheating on her. She came at me with a kitchen knife and slashed my arms several times before I could run out of the house. I hopped on my motorbike and made it a kilometer down the road before passing out from blood loss. Woke up in the hospital with a shattered leg and several blood transfusions. I was working a low-level job in the ER when this guy came in with one of his testicles shot off. He said he accidentally did it to himself, but given how evasive he was about details, it's more likely he was a drug dealer who got caught stealing from his boss, and the shooting was retribution. When asked when the shooting occurred, he got coy and said he couldn't remember because he was engrossed in a baseball game on TV. Whose gun was it? He just found it somewhere. Right. Well, what else are they supposed to do when they don't know any mob-connected veterinarians? Story 5. How did you get that stab wound in your abdomen? I put a knife on the kitchen counter and forgot it was there. Then I walked into it. Also, me. Have you had anything to eat or drink today prior to your surgery? Patient. No, with a half-eaten candy bar in front of them. Me. Are you sure? Because if you have, you could vomit upon going to sleep and it could enter your lungs, causing you to die. Patient. Then yes, I have. I had half that candy bar. My favorite assailant was some guy. I was just walking down the street when some guy stabbed me. Or some guy shot me when I was getting gas. Be careful, everyone. Some guy is out there. He's dangerous and will mess you up. I've totally had the knife to the abdomen guy. Mine said he was angry and threw the knife when he was holding onto the counter, where it then bounced back and stabbed him in the abdomen 3 times. I'd like to meet this knife to the abdomen guy. He seems to be immortal. Story 6. Do you have any medical problems? No. So no diabetes? No diabetes. What medications are you taking? Metformin for my diabetes? I facepalm every time. There's a former ER nurse in TikTok that does skits about his former career, and he recently did one where a patient was adamant he didn't have any problems with his blood pressure because he takes his blood pressure pills. My favorite is when patients obviously have no idea what meds they're supposed to be taking, but they don't want to admit they're negligent, so they say, "You should know what meds I'm on," and act all indignant. The things people say to protect their egos are ridiculous. We forget that half of being a medical professional is like working the worst kind of customer service. Story 7. Not considering the psychiatric and the boring answers, like people who just swear with all their heart that they are taking their medications when they clearly aren't, which is the vast majority, there's not much really. Only one really unique one comes to mind. It was a patient who was a really kind old man who always would talk a lot with us, telling stories, praising the beauty of everyone in a tender and respectable way, saying how really grateful he was for our work, and so on. This old man would always appear with really high blood pressure values, even though he would swear that he was always using his medication correctly. And after we did so many changes with his medication in many different ways, it's only natural to think that there's some problem with how he's taking them, if he was doing it at all. However, one day, after noticing that he would always go to the bathroom before even reaching out to the receptionist, someone discovered he would always eat a load of pure salt before being seen by any of the doctors, trying to make his pressure intentionally go sky high. Later, we also obviously discovered that he indeed would not take his medications correctly as well, in order to obtain the result again and again. Turns out he suffered a lot from loneliness, and he was an old man that didn't have much contact with his family anymore, but mostly because his family didn't reach out to him almost at any given time, even though everyone lived close by. And in his desperation, sustaining dangerous high blood pressure was the best way he had to obtain human contact within the emergency every week. This was the most odd one, but it's really common in general among elderly patients to appear lying about their symptoms only to gather some attention and a private minute to speak about anything else. Most of the time, they book an appointment only to talk about recent trivialities, which makes them clearly better. Although, by the end of the talk, it's also easy to see how they gather back part of the sadness that the loneliness brings to them. Around my patients, at least, it's common for many to cry as they leave. Loneliness is a hell of both a simple and complex problem, and one that no one should be bound to live with. This is heartbreaking. When I was a new grad RN, I worked in urgent care, and during downtimes, we made a lot of phone calls to follow up, give lab results, etc. I would always get stuck on the phone with older folks forever when they would ask the most basic questions about their medication or health condition and then just get to chatting. I would always have so much I needed to get back to, but I couldn't rush them off the phone. They just seemed so desperate for human interaction. It's such a palpable loneliness. I work in EMS, and we had a similar problem with an older woman who would call 911 like clockwork every day for non-emergent complaints. Eventually, we caught on that she was just lonely, and it became an unofficial policy that we would go round to the grocery store at the start of a shift and pick up stuff for Mima to cook us for breakfast. We were there to get fed, drink coffee, and chat. If we tried to help cook, we got slapped with a wooden spoon. 911 calls from her stopped till the day she didn't wake up. Missed that old lady. I once knew an old man who called a pizza place just to talk. They ended up sending him a free pie every Friday night until the day he died. Story 8. Their age. Had a woman say she was 30 when she clearly didn't look like it. Oh well, I move on to other questions. I look at her files and the lab reports have her real age on them. 41. Like, why though? What difference does it make lying to healthcare staff? This is health related, not your Tinder profile. Nobody's gonna see this and go, I ain't dating an old lady. By the way, she was married with children. I only learned this from reading his death certificate, but my grandfather had been lying about his age forever. He was 5 years younger than he claimed to be. Our best guess, we always thought he was 5 years younger than his wife. Turns out it was 10. I accidentally lied on my patient form today. I said my age was a year younger than I was because I forgot how old I was. Did the math of 2023 minus birth year and then forgot that my birthday in 2023 hadn't happened yet. I realized my mistake in the car on the way home from my appointment. Ladies and gentlemen, our doctors are officially overworked. Story 9. I had a lady tell me she had no idea how she got a rash she had on her face. I left the room, gave a report to the MD, and when I walked back in with the doctor, she looked at me and said, I didn't think you'd be coming back in the room, and then proceeded to confess that she'd been cheating on her husband and thought she had herpes. She did not have herpes. This must be the standard for any medical practice. I'm an ophthalmic tech. At least once a day, I ask a patient if they've noticed any new vision changes over the last year, and they answer, nope, everything is about the same and my glasses are still working well. No concerns at all. Then when I bring the doctor in and come in with him, all of a sudden they have a laundry list of issues. Drives me crazy. This happens so often. I had a patient recently who I asked about her medical history and specifically asked if she had any cardiac history. No across the board. I'm giving the report to the triage RN, stating that the patient denied cardiac history, and she chooses that moment to blurt out, you know, I did have that bypass last year after my heart attack. Hey, give her a break. It must have just slipped her mind. Story 10. It's not so much a patient lie as it is me being dumb, inexperienced, and uncomfortable asking necessary questions. I had a hypothetical patient during residency that was a very manly veteran, and I was admitting him for rectal bleeding. He was in the age where it was more than likely colon cancer, so I didn't think it was necessary to ask for a sexual history. Folks at this particular establishment were known to at times be homophobic, and I had been yelled at by patients previously for asking, do you have sex with men, women, or both? It ate away at my conscience though, so I went back in absurdly nervously and asked him. He answered, son, I'm as gay as the rainbow. I've been at the bathhouse for the last couple of nights, but I wasn't sure how it would go over to admit it. That's when the bleeding started. It was a very important lesson for me. A lot of my doctors are female, and it's always a bit weird when I've had to bring up sexual side effects of medications with them. Luckily, I worked in a pharmacy surrounded by specialists, so I'm a little better than most at discussing uncomfortable things when necessary. I can see how many people would have issues bringing up those topics. Reminds me of King of the Hill whenever Hank has medical issues he doesn't like talking about. Learning how to bring up these topics without putting off patients from talking about them is a challenge, lol. So many of the comments in this thread reflect people feeling too uncomfortable to presumably be honest. I don't blame docs or patients for that. It's rough on both ends. ER docs get the worst of it as they could have one patient bleeding out from a polytrauma, another in septic shock, and a third with a perforated bowel from a large vegetable in their rectum. They have to prioritize life-saving measures over making people feel comfortable talking about why said vegetable ended up where it is. Bedside manner is so important, and when talking about these subjects, it's essential. I think it's sorely lacking for a lot of doctors these days. Story 11. I had a guy insist that someone else put cocaine and heroin in his urine, even after I tried to move on with the conversation. We have a favorite story about a colleague who failed a random drug test. Turns out he was at a party where other people were doing drugs, not him, but he put his sandwich down on a table at one point. Someone told me that he went to his friends and there was coke all over the card table. There was apparently a fight and the table got flipped and it all went up into the air and he breathed it in. That's what he gets for not wearing a mask. Story 12. One of my favorite things I wrote my first year out of medical school. Please note the patient has stated multiple times that he wants to leave and would leave AMA against medical advice. He asked multiple times whether he could eat and stated he is hungry. Explained to the patient that we would like to start a full liquid diet first, and if he tolerated it well, would transition to regular foods. However, the patient ordered Chinese food delivery instead. Then the patient was complaining of a headache, was given Tylenol for the headache. Patient stated that this did not help him. His sister at the bedside went to the nearby pharmacy and bought goody powder, aspirin. Sister did ask whether she could give him goody powder. She was told not to give patients the goody powder. She supposedly did not. For context, the patient had a catastrophic GI bleed from taking too much aspirin. As someone with Crohn's who just got out of the hospital for a GI bleed and infection, yay, holy crap, that sounds like an absolute nightmare for you. You should have seen my face after I could hold down water for the first time in 4 days. I literally cried. My nurses and doctors were wonderful as well. Thank you all for all you do. This is going to be me soon, just with ibuprofen. Have insane back pain and have another month before my next cortisone injection. I can't function without it though, so I keep taking it. I felt like maybe I was taking too many of these, and then Reddit scared the crap out of me. Who says the internet can't be useful? Story 13. Patient. I haven't drank alcohol in months. Patient's family. It's true. I've been with her the whole time. Me. Ma'am, your alcohol level is 325. Patient. Impossible. I would never lie to you. Know of someone who had their entire family lie about having stopped drinking. Imagine the transplant team's surprise when he went through DTs while in the recovery room post-op. My instructor shared a story once of a patient that kept insisting she never drank alcohol. It turned out she didn't even consider wine to be alcohol because it was served in church. Only distilled spirits and beer were alcohol, so her 2 bottles of wine a day didn't count. Alcoholics are often so afraid of judgment that they'd rather get sick than admit their problem to a doctor, someone who's heard it all before anyway. Story 14. One dude lied about being paralyzed after a lumbar puncture. A nurse patient says he can't move legs following a lumbar puncture, spinal tap. I called the team that did the procedure and they assured me there was no indication of this sort of injury happening during the procedure, but agreed with my plan to get urgent MRI. I go to examine him and the nurse says she thinks he moved one of his feet. Next thing I know, he says he can actually move his legs again, but they are feeling weird. Then this weird feeling turns into intense pain and he asks for intravenous narcotics. I tell him no because this story makes no sense. By God, it was a miracle, I tell you, when this man walked himself right out of the hospital after I refused the IV narcotics. Also, the MRI was normal. I had a ruptured disc in my neck once and couldn't lay down because of the severe pain. I've never had to take medications for severe pain before. Nothing more powerful than Tylenol. I went in for an MRI and they gave me Dilaudid to be able to lay still for the exam. It made me understand just how easy it would be to get hooked on a drug. Such a euphoric feeling. My dad had a hard fall off of a ladder and they gave him some hard-hitting stuff. Forget what, to self-administer if he got really bad. He took it once and then gave it back to the doctor. He was scared he liked it way too much and didn't feel safe with it in his home. I was sitting in an ER waiting room and a couple came off the street, walked up to the desk and said, "We broke our feet and need pain meds." I had to admire their directness. Story 15. Had gastric sleeve surgery several years ago. 2 weeks before surgery, you start a liquid diet to shrink your liver or the fat around your liver and make surgery easier. Also makes recovery easier. Psychologists shared that one patient had food in their stomach when the surgery had started. So not only did they not do the liquid diet, they also ate 12 hours before the surgery. This was part of our discussion of how they decide who is ready for surgery. They all felt this patient was ready, was compliant, etc., and the day of the surgery totally blew it. The surgeon stopped the procedure on this patient and closed up. I was shaking. It was such a journey to get to surgery, it would have been devastating. Nurse here had a patient who wasn't to eat anything swear to me she didn't eat any of the McDonald's her boyfriend brought in. She proceeded to vomit French fries and milkshake up 20 minutes later. She stuck to her story and still swore she didn't eat anything, even as I was mopping up her barf off of the floor. I'm an oral surgery assistant. We get this all the time in oral surgery. I think because people have the mindset they are only getting their wisdom out. It's still a sedation. We had a mom lie one time about her kid not eating, and afterwards vomited red slushy all over our newly installed carpet. I also overheard a mom ask her kid in recovery recovery if they were hungry, and then say, well, at least you ate some of my sausage egg McGriddle before you came in. Needless to say, I told the surgeon, and the mom got quite a lecture about the dangers of not being honest and risking their child's safety. Is it bad that this is making me hungry for McDonald's and slushies? Story 16. Resident doctor here. This happened during my psychiatry rotation in medical school. I wouldn't say it was a dumb lie since the patient was mentally ill, but I would say it was the most memorable lie. There was a patient at an inpatient psychiatric facility for suicidal ideation. She constantly insisted that she had a mass on her breasts and demanded to be physically examined only by male doctors. When the psychiatrist I was rotating under declined to perform a physical exam, she asked me to do it during my daily patient interview. I also declined the physical exam, but had a bit of a hunch to check her medical records. It turned out she had an ultrasound done a week before that found only normal breast tissue without masses. However, apparently this lady had frequented many doctors' offices with various complaints of an unspecified nature and would usually focus on breasts or vaginal complaints when she visited male physicians' offices. We diagnosed her with factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, and histrionic personality disorder. It seems her goal was mostly attention from medical professionals. She had lots of issues, but we also had to be careful to make sure she wasn't fishing for a lawsuit. Patients like her are why doctors document everything meticulously, so the patient wouldn't admit to making things up all the time. According to the psychiatrist I was working with, she didn't actually believe any of her health problems exist, and her primary goal was the attention from medical professionals. If she actually believed she was sick, she would have diagnosed her with an illness anxiety disorder, commonly known as hypochondria. Psychiatrists do physical exams actually. They often conduct them to check for certain medication side effects, which can cause Parkinson's-like movements or muscle rigidity, among other things. For more complicated medical issues, they will usually defer to a patient's outpatient primary care doctor after discharge from the hospital, consult an internal medicine doctor on staff, or send the patient to a medical hospital from the psych unit. I am an RN on a community psych team. A lot of our patients do not trust the medical community, so often refuse primary care or hospital. Basically, the psychiatrists rely on the RN's physical assessments and order what we recommend. We have a pretty great track record for treating patients this way. Collaborative care at its best. I call myself MacGyver, with all the things I can do with limited resources. I would definitely trust a MacGyver psych RN. They could help my mental health and then build me a bomb diffuser with toothpicks and sand. Story 17. The worst I've heard was from the emergency department. Common question before shooting an x-ray is how did it happen, because I may have to use an optional position or something. From women, I tripped on the rug. I dropped a heavy box on my hand or foot. It was dark and I didn't see that the door was open. There's always a social worker in the emergency department, and we take her to imaging for better shots. Sometimes radiologists would order a SNAT series, suspected non-accidental trauma. When there's one break, there's always a history of more. I was actually surprised when a few years back I had a more clumsy than usual streak and ended up in the same ER 4 times within a 6-month period for various injuries. 2 sprained wrists, bruising, scooter accidents on the way to and from work, stitches, bleeding, bruising, and suspected concussion, got up to pee in the middle of the night and passed out, hitting my face on the tile, and torn ligaments in my ankle, resulting in swelling up to the size of a football and turning black and green. They swore it was broken, but it was surprisingly not. I stepped on it wrong, and none of those times did they ask about a domestic violence situation. Friends and I were surprised because if I was a doctor seeing a young woman in her late 20s come in with that many injuries of those types in such a short period of time, I would be incredibly concerned. Maybe because I came in alone each time, they assumed I'd volunteer the information or say something if I was in danger. I was in a mosh pit once and caught the shirt the lead singer threw into the crowd. Some guy wanted it more and ripped it out of my hand, breaking the ring finger of my right hand in an upside-down L shape. I'm sure the only reason I didn't get sent to the social worker for suspected domestic violence is because it was actually the second person in the same ER that night from the mosh pit. First was a guy who got thrown over the barrier onto his head during the All That Remains show. On the other hand, 19 years ago when my ex broke my hand and then took me to the ER, they believed the BS excuse that my ex gave them and didn't bother to even get me alone to ask me if everything was alright. Doctors must hate it when Metallica comes to town. There's going to be a lot of beat up metalheads in the ER that night. Story 18. I work in ophthalmology. I see patients nearly every week that are faking vision loss. Most often, it's to try to get disability. Sometimes it's just attention-seeking or extreme stress or anxiety. In rare cases, patients truly believe they cannot see or have convinced themselves they cannot see when all exam findings and testings are normal. It's called non-organic vision loss. I've got a good story for you then. My wife's uncle is a doctor. When he was a resident, his attending had a patient faking total blindness. Patient failed all the typical tests, meaning he could see fine. I believe they were trying to get disability like you said, ended up having to testify about it. His attending was smart as hell though, and when the patient left the room, the attending said, "Dr. Graves, follow the patient until they leave the hospital properly." He did, and his testimony at court went something like this. Lawyer: "So you followed your patient as they left the hospital?" Doctor: "Yes, I did." Lawyer: "And how did the patient leave?" Doctor: "He got in his car and drove away." Case dismissed. I lost color vision and visual acuity in my right eye. 1 optometrist, 3 ophthalmologists, 1 neurologist, 2 emergency physicians, and 5 months of nobody could figure it out, just to get sent to a neural ophthalmologist who immediately referred me to ocular oncology. It was cancer in my optic nerve. I lost vision in one eye suddenly in middle school after experiencing extreme stress. It came back a day later though, and I was shortly after diagnosed with migraines and then bipolar disorder. Brains are so weird. No one believed that I couldn't see from one eye. It was like a weird black tunnel. Thought I was dying. Brains are called the final frontier of biology for a reason. Story 19. Adherence to medical treatment when I have literally pulled their pharmacy records and know they haven't picked up their medications in over a year. Don't assume they aren't taking them. A close person and myself both had a script for an expensive inhaler. One of us didn't need it anymore, but kept filling it because our insurance was cheaper than the other ones. And this happens a lot between people. Just saying. True story. My mom has type 2 diabetes and kept a paper journal of her blood sugars. It was immaculate. Every once in a while, a little high, one a little low, not all of them ending in 0. It was also a complete fabrication, and when she saw her endocrinologist, she showed her that her glucometer had a memory function and she hadn't checked it in at least 2 weeks, and her A1C was 11. Normal is around 6. I believe in the industry that's called the medical ostrich defense. Story 20. Anything, to be honest. I honestly don't care what you do or don't do. Usually if I'm asking, it's because it matters for your healthcare, and if you lie about it, all you're doing is putting yourself in danger. As a more real example, I've had a post-transition transgender patient lie about the sex they were born with. I understand it's hard to deal with a lot of the medical community that can be judgmental, but this patient ended up having prostate cancer, only found out after we scanned them. Another one lied about having prior back surgery before I was about to send them for an MRI. Did a physical exam and saw the scar. Asked again and they just said they didn't feel it was important and didn't want me to assume it was related to a previous surgery. They were there for back and abdominal pain. Look, I feel for the last patient. I had back surgery, and since then if I've had issues with my back or shoulder, etc., it's immediately, yep, it's the same thing. Fun fact, I know my body and I know what various pain feels like. I do a lot of physical therapy and all that stuff, so when something is different, I know. But doctors will generally jump to the most obvious explanation. I haven't lied to them about it, but for example, when I went in with upper back pain through my shoulder, I was told it's just old or referred pain from your surgery. I explained I was very familiar with what my back felt like. This was different and it needed looking into. Not only that, it was a sharp or sudden pain while doing chin-ups. It was not from my old injury. Nope, take some anti-inflams and rest, you'll be fine. I basically had to be that guy and be a jerk about it until they wrote up a form of a scan and clearly didn't like doing so. Surprise, surprise, I had a major labrum tear on one side of my shoulder and a minor on the other. Zero chance it was healing on its own. Just from reading the story, the issue with lying about a previous back surgery goes beyond just trying to figure out why a patient is in pain, but also about trying to make sure we keep the patient safe. Don't want to MRI someone with magnetic hardware in their body. It just proves that psychology is the hardest thing to treat. Some would rather die than tell the truth. Story 21. Their identity. Insurance fraud using a friend's relative's insurance card. As a resident in a very large East Coast hospital, I was tasked to figure things out when the blood bank called and said their blood type changed. When confronted with getting the wrong blood that may kill them, they almost always tell the truth. This type of fraud has also resulted in people who have been dead and autopsied rising from the dead and appearing in a clinic or ER. We had a lady do this once and everyone remembered who she was because she had visited the ER within the last week and acted acted like a massive jerk the whole time she was there, and I believe verbally threatened someone. She was trying to get pain meds, and the classic, "I'm not going for x-rays until I get my pain meds. You're not getting pain meds until after your x-rays are completed," battle was occurring between her and the doctor. I finally take her over for images, and she tries to bully me into hurrying up and getting the exam over with. I tell her I'm not taking a single image until she signs the pregnancy disclaimer. She got so mad at me she took it from me and signed her real name in a hurry. When I took her back, the nurses were on the phone with risk management because they had been gathering evidence to report fraud and call the police. I gave them the form with her real name on it and everyone was just dumbfounded. The gentleman from registration who first recognized her almost died of laughter when I brought that paper over. A family friend got pregnant while in the country, Canada, illegally. She was worried about the medical bill not being covered because of her status, so she borrowed her neighbor's ID. Years later, you can imagine how difficult it was for her now adult son to get his government info changed to reflect his actual parents. Medical fraud is sadly inevitable when a system only profits the wealthy. Story 22. Had a patient show up the ER with a wound to the back of her head. I say, "Hey, Miss X, what happened?" "I don't know. I picked up chicken from the gas station and went to bed, and this morning I noticed I was bleeding." I start inspecting the wound. Looks like it tracks pretty far, and there's this strange cotton-like material sticking out that is also tracking too deep to visualize. I press her some more about the circumstances because my ER doc spider sense starts going off. Me, were you assaulted? Did someone harm you? Were you in a car accident? Did something fall on you? Patient, no, I just went to bed. Maybe I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. Finally, I decide to send her through the donut of truth, aka get a CT scan of her head, before me and my trusty scalpel start seeing where this trail of mystery cotton leads. The lady had a bullet lodged up against her skull bone. Still don't have an answer to the cotton, but I'm guessing the gun fired through some cloth. When I told her it was a bullet in her head, her response was, "Oh, weird." And then she went back to playing Candy Crush on her phone. Maybe she lives on the second floor of an apartment complex and someone on the first floor fired a gun up through their ceiling/her roof. Would have gone through her pillow explaining the cloth. Also, head trauma and blood loss might make one act a little weird. I mean, chances are she knows what gun the bullet came from and who was using it when it was fired, but weirder things have happened. But can someone tell me if the chicken was okay? Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.